Hello everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Pranav Harish. I'm a product manager at Entine and today I want to talk about something that doesn't get enough airtime in PM circles. The real, the measurable dollar cost of the things we choose not to ship, right? This presentation is called the cost of deprioritization. I'm going to use a live, active, real world crisis where $870 million in payment fraud, a $1 billion lawsuit, and a Senate hearing to make one argument every time we push a safety feature to the next sprint, someone somewhere pays for that decision, right? So by the end of this session, I want you to walk away with something specific, a framework for how to make hard product decisions when speed and safety are in direct conflict. And you will never deprioritize a safety feature the same way again. That's the deal I'm making with you upfront. Yeah, so let me start with a real case from a real lawsuit filed by the New York Attorney General in August 2025. A Con Edison customer gets a phone call. The caller says they are from Con Edison. Your power will be cut off tonight unless you pay your outstanding balance right now via Zelly to an account called Cond Billing. Right? So the customer panics and they open their banking app and they send around 1476 and 89 cents dollars. 8 seconds later, the money is gone, irrecoverably gone. And when they call the JP Morgan Chase Bank to report it, the bank tells them, quoting directly from the lawsuit, we can get that money from back, right? So this is not a one-off. This is a pattern across um, 9 lakh 10,000 fraud complaints at just three banks like Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo, totaling more than $870 million since Zelly launched in 2017. And it's accelerating as well. The FTC reported that $373.6 million lost to peer-to-peer payment scams in just the first 9 months of 2025 alone, and that's a 35% increase year over year. And this is the crime scene. Now the question I want to ask you is who built it, right? So the PM takeaway from this is like the customer impact metrics belong in your OKRs, so not just the legal team's inbox, right? Yeah, so here is a structure of the problem, and it's a product structure problem, right? Not just a legal one. There are three pillars in the Zelly ecosystems. Early warning services, or EWS, owns the network and the Zelly brand. When asked about fraud, they say that's the bank's responsibility. And the banks, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and the rest, are both the owners of EWS and the channel through which Zelly runs. Their response is like, the customer authorized the payment themselves, we can reverse it. And the customer, they have been psychologically manipulated by a professional scammer, having just watched their savings disappear in 8 seconds, right? Nobody helps them. This is the accountability vacuum where $870 million fell into it. And the punchline is like there is no US regulation today that forces any of these parties to reimburse victims of this type of fraud. As a product people, we should recognize this pattern immediately when ownership of a problem is split across three parties, right? It effectively belongs to no one. And that's an architecture design with consequences. So, when accountability is shared by three parties equally, it is owned by none, right? And design ownership into your product architecture. And this is the takeaway as a PM. So, before I explain why the product failed, I want to show you mechanically how the fraud works because Once you see it, the product gaps become obvious. The step one is like the fraudster calls the victim. This is a social engineering, impersonating a utility company, a bank, or a government official. The victim is scared and under pressure. The step two is the victim opens their banking app and initiates a Zelly payment, right? So they believe they are doing the right thing. And the step three is the bank sends a risk check request to the EWS network. This is the critical window. It happens in under 200 milliseconds. The step four is like EWS returns no fraud flag. And why? Because the signals are insufficient. The account looks new but not flagged. There is no cross bank history. The behavioral data is not being analyzed in real time. And the step 5, the payment is approved instantly. The step 6 is the money arrives in the fraudster's account who cashes out immediately. And the final step, the victim calls the bank. Step 8, sorry, the step 8 is the final one. The bank says the payment is irrecoverable, right? So here is the critical gap I want you to focus on. Step 3 and 4 under 200 milliseconds with incomplete signals, and the fraud is mathematically complete before any human being can intervene, right? This is not a people failure, it is a product and data architecture failure for sure. Yeah, the three product decisions that created the crisis. Now, here is the core thesis I want this audience to sit with. This crisis was not created by bad actors alone. It was enabled by product decisions, right? When EWS launched Zelly in 2017, the three core product decisions were made. Each had a rational business justification. Each created a fraud vector, and the decision one is like instant and irrecoverable transfers. Business reason is like beat Venmo on speed and user experience. And fraud consequences is there is literally no undo button. Once a payment leaves, it's permanent. And coming to decision two, open enrollment. Any bank account can participate, and the business reason is like to maximize the network size as fast as possible. And the fraud consequences is like fraudsters can onboard just as easily as real users and cash out the moment funds arrive. And the final decision, no cross bank fraud signal sharing. The business reason is banks are competitors, their data is proprietary, and the fraud consequence is like every bank in the network is completely blind to fraud patterns happening on every other bank, right? I need you to notice something like not one of these is an engineering failure, each one is a prioritization decision. Someone decided the growth, speed, and competitive positioning mattered more than a threat modeling, right? That's a PM decision. That's our domain, and that's why this story belongs in this room. And the takeaway of PM is run a threat model before your next sprint planning. So every backlog decision has a fraud cost. The smoking gun. This is the slide I call the smoking gun because it is the most damning piece of evidence in the New York Attorney General's lawsuit, and the one that matters most from a product management perspective. So in 2019, right, just 2 years after Zelly launched, engineers at EWS developed critical fraud prevention safeguards. They built the fix according to the NYAG's lawsuit, which EWS disputes. Those safeguards were not deployed until 2023. That is a 4 year gap between 2019 and 2023. More than $870 million were stolen from customers while those controls sat undeployed, right? And here is what makes this undeniable regardless of the legal dispute. So when those safeguards finally went live in 2023, the fraud losses dropped by hundreds of millions of dollars almost immediately. So whatever the reason for the delay, whether it was a legal caution, resource constraints, competing priorities, or commercial pressure, right? The cost of the delay was paid by the customers, not by EWS, not by the banks, by ordinary people who lost money they couldn't get back, right? In PM terms, the feature was deprioritized, and I want us to sit with that word deprioritized because it sounds clinical, but in this case, it had a price tag, right? Hundreds of $1 million and hundreds of thousands of victims. So the PM takeaway from this slide is like every deprioritized safety feature has a cost. So make that cost visible in your PRD in dollars, not just risk ratings. Yeah. So legal battlefield. So I want to be completely clear about the current state of play because this is not a closed case study. This is happening right now. In December 2024, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau files a federal lawsuit against the EWS, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. Major headlines internationally on March 4th, 2025. Under the new administration, the CFPB drops the case entirely. The federal consumer watchdogs walk away. The regulatory vacuum is now complete at the federal level. And in August 13, 2025, the NYAG steps in and files a $1 billion state lawsuit. The AG alleges like EWS built Zelly without critical safety features and that over $1 billion was stolen from New Yorkers alone. That lawsuit is in active proceedings right now as I speak. Additionally, a class action against Bank of America, Georgian versus Bank of America remains in litigation, and multiple other states' attorneys general are watching the New York case closely. The federal regulator is gone, the state have taken over, and the legal exposure for any organization that fails to act on this is growing every quarter. Now, is this solved? No, it's getting worse, right? So I want to uh, prompt a question that I often get at this point. Didn't Zelly fix some of this? Is the problem really still as bad as you are describing? Yes, and some ways it's worse. In 2024, Zelly processed over $1 trillion in transactions at their own claimed fraud rate. That still translates to hundreds of millions in losses. And P2P scam losses grew 35% year over year in 2025, not decelerating or accelerating. The current exposure estimates put annual losses at $725 million with projections exceeding 1 billion per year if trends continue. So what has improved, right? So the EWS did deploy those long delayed 2019 safeguards. Some banks now cover select imposter scam categories. Basic velocity checks were added. And what is still broken is there is no law requiring banks to reimburse authorized fraud victims. The CFPB has been dismantled, and fraud losses are still rising. The window for product leadership on this issue is not closing; it is widening. And yeah, let's talk about what good actually looks like. And the thing that excites me most is that none of this is speculative. All three pillars I'm about to describe exist today. So, the pillar one, the behavioral biometrics, the companies like Sardine and BioCatch have built technology that analyzes how you behave on your device and how you type, how you scroll, and how you hold your phone, right? Not your credentials, your behavior. And here is the specific breakthrough for Zelly type fraud. Sardine can detect whether two people are controlling an account simultaneously, which means if a fraudster is on the phone coaching a victim through a payment right now, the system detects that in the real time before the money leaves the account. And in pillar 2, the real time cross bank intelligence, that JP Morgan and others already run ML models looking at device ID, login history, and geographic signals. But that intelligence is completely siloed per bank. The fix is a shared graph, fraud graph at the EWS network level. So a consortium API that scores every receiving account in under 200 milliseconds using signals from across all 2200 member banks, right? And the pillar 3, on device Gen AI scam detection. So Google has demonstrated Gemini Nano running locally on Android devices, listening during a live phone call and alerting the user if the conversation matches known scam patterns. For example, warning you that no legitimate bank will ever ask you to move money to keep it safe, right? So, on device private, real time, no data leaves the phone. And this is a shipping product feature you can put on a roadmap right now. Yeah, so let me get briefly technical because the engineering constraint here is what makes this problem genuinely hard, right? The core challenge is brutal. So you have under 500 milliseconds to make a fraud decision on a payment that once approved is permanent. Your entire pipeline, data retrieval, feature computation, model inference, and the decision logics have to fit inside half a second, right? The legacy fraud systems were never built for this. They were designed for card payments where you have 2 to 5 seconds and can reverse the charges, right? So instant payments destroy those assumptions. So the solution is a tired decision modeling, like tier 1 runs in under 50 milliseconds, lightweight rules, and a gradient boosted model, so fast enough to catch roughly 70% of obvious fraud. And tier 2 runs in under 300 milliseconds, a deeper ML model augmented with device signals and behavioral data. This handles the ambiguous mid-risk cases that pass through tier 1. And Type 3 runs in under 500 milliseconds, a graph neural network that looks for synthetic identity fraud and organized fraud rings. So these require modeling relationships between accounts, not just individual account behavior. And the output is like the auto approve if confidence exceeds your threshold, auto decline if the fraud signal is clear, escalate only the 2 to 3% that falls in the ambiguous middle, right? That's 97 to 98% auto decision rate is what makes this commercially viable. So your CX team can live with it. So your risk team can live with it, and that's your dial position. So the PM takeaway from this slide is like 97 to 98% auto decision equal to commercially viable. The 2 to 3% ambiguous cases need human review. That's your SLA design target. So now I want to do something that I think is often missing from product presentations about fraud. I want to talk about what this actually cost to build, right? Because if you walk out of here and try to get budget of any of this, you will be asked how much does it cost and how long does it take and what are the risks. So let's answer those questions upfront. So behavioral biometric SDK integration roughly around 200 to 500 million dollars, I think. Yeah. And with a time to value of 6 to 8 weeks. The key risk is false positives, blocking legitimate users. The mitigation is like the A/B test on 5% of traffic first before full rollout. The cross-bank risk scoring API at the EWS network level. This is a big one where it cost 1 million to 3 million, taking around 6 months. The key risk is data sharing, legal complexity, banks sharing signals with competitors, and the mitigation is a consortium model similar to how SIFT works, right? And on-device Gen AI alert, the uh, 300K to 800K dollars, it takes 3 to 4 months to build, time to value. The risk is user trust. Will customers accept an AI listening during phone calls? The mitigation is on device processing, where no data ever leaves the phone. And the dispute resolution LLM, where it takes 500K to $1.5 million, and it takes 4 to 6 months. Risk is model errors on legal claims. The mitigation is like human in the loop for any dispute over 5,000 million, sorry, 5,000 cases, $5,000 cases, right? And now the ROI argument: phase zero cost approximately um, 300K to implement Zelly losses that amount in every 4 hours, right? The return on investment case is already made. The only question is like, and it is always the PM question, is prioritization. So the PM takeaway from this slide is: never let a safety feature die in backlog grooming without attaching a dollar cost to the deprioritization. That number changes every conversation, right? Yeah. So before I give you the roadmap, I want to show you a benchmark, because this is a solved problem elsewhere. We don't need to invent the answer, we just need the courage to adopt it. The UK launched faster payments in 2008. That's a decade before Zelly. They faced the exact same authorized push payment fraud wave starting around 2015, right? So their regulatory response was fundamentally different. The UK payment systems regulator stepped in and created a mandatory shared reimbursement framework. The liability of app fraud is split 50-50 between the sending and receiving bank, and banks collectively fund a pool to compensate victims, and fraud losses have started declining. So compared to that, to the US today, so no reimbursement requirement, and a hobbled federal regulator, and fraud losses growing 35% year over year. And here is my product angle on this: whichever bank or fintech builds the compliance infrastructure for a US version of this model first, they own the narrative, and they become the company that protected the customers when a regulatory walked away, right? This is not just the right thing to do, that's a product differentiation strategy. The takeaway of a PM is the UK solved this, the blueprint exists. The first fintech to build this compliance infrastructure in the US wins the market narrative, right? Yeah, so I want to give you a framework you can take out of this room and use immediately. I call it the PM's fraud dial. So imagine a dial with three positions. On the left, full friction, block everything suspicious. On the right, zero friction, approves everything instantly. In the middle, tired risk decisioning. So if you turn the dial all the way to the left, you get zero fraud losses. You also get a 40% conversion drop, and customers churning to competitors, and your CX team in open revolt, right? So your risk team loves it, but other than that, no one else does. If you turn the dial all the way to the right, you get zero customer friction, and maximum fraud losses, and a regulatory liability that will eventually bankrupt you, right? So your CX team loves it, your risk team, legal team, and eventually your board does not. The middle position, the tied ML decisioning, gives you a fraud loss rate below 0.5%, a false positive rate of below 3%, and a product that is commercially viable. Everyone can live with it, right? The PM's job is to own where the dial sits and critically to move it based on data, not based on whoever shouted loudest in the last sprint review, right? The tool for owning that dial position is your false positive budget. Define it explicitly at the start of every quarter. That number is your contract with the risk team, the CX team, and the legal, and also the CEO. Once it's explicit, the decisions become much cleaner, right? The PM takeaway from this slide is define your false positive budget before sprint planning, and that number is your dial position. Own it explicitly, not by default. Yeah. So coming to the roadmap, so how would I actually ship this? Here is the roadmap I would take to my team and my leadership. The phase zero right now to month two. Integrate a behavioral biometrics SDK, Sardine or BioCatch into the mobile banking app. Cost approximately 300k dollars. Success metric is like scam session detection rate. This is your fastest path to intercepting fraud before money moves, right? And the phase one, month 3 to 5, build or adopt the cross bank receiving account risk scoring API at the EWS network level. Cost like $1 to $3 million. The key metric is false positive rate. You need to be below 3%, right? So otherwise the product team will shut it down. On the phase 2, month 6 to 9, deploy on device Gen AI scam detection. Cost approximately 500k dollars, and the metric is like scam interruption rate. How often does the AI warning actually stop a customer from completing a fraudulent transfer? And phase 3, month 10 to 12, use an LLM to auto classify, auto route, and resolve dispute investigations. So cost approximately $1 million, and the target is like cut resolution time from 14 days to 3 days. This is a compliance win and a CX win simultaneously. And the phase 4 is like month 12 and beyond. Begin building the UK style shared reimbursement fund architecture. This is the long game, right? Building regulatory infrastructure before it's mandated. So you lead rather than scramble. So the PM takeaway from this slide is phase zero ROI, the 300k investment versus 500 million plus annual fraud exposure. The math is done. Now make the prioritization call. Yeah, so now the PM tension, the slide only a PM can present. So I want to close the content part of this talk and with the most honest slide in the deck, because everything I have described is technically achievable. The hard part is not engineering, the hard part is what happens in the room when you present the roadmap, right? So your risk and fraud team wants maximum friction on every suspicious payment. So they are optimizing against false negatives, missed fraud. Every undetected scam is potentially legal liability, right? Your product and CX team wants zero friction, lightning fast payments, and they are optimizing against false positives, blocked legitimate users. Like every good transaction you stop is lost revenue, right? So your legal and compliance team wants a bulletproof audit trail and a reimbursement framework ready before the regulator arrives. They are optimizing against liability. And finally, the CEO and the board want growth metrics, network size, transaction volumes. They are optimizing against anything that slows the adoption. And every safety feature you want to add, someone in that room will say it will kill conversion. So you as a PM owns the line between all four of them. You hold the false positive budget, you negotiate the friction threshold, You decide what ships in phase 0 and what waits for phase 4. And that decision is not made once, it is made every single sprint, right? So every backlog grooming session, every time a safety ticket gets pushed to the next cycle, that is a decision only a product manager can make, right? And the Zelly case study shows us with 870 million dollars in receipts what happens when that decision gets made by a default rather than by design. Yep. So let me close with this. Like, the fraud is still live. The NYAG lawsuit is in active proceedings today. The fix is known. It was known in 2019. The ROI case is already made. The phase zero costs washed what Zelly losses in 4 hours of fraud. All that's missing is a PM who owns it end to end, right? Before I open for questions, here are the 5 things I want you to take out of this room with you. One is like customer impact metrics belong in your OKRs, not just in the legal team's inbox. The two is run a threat model before your next sprint planning. Every backlog decisioning as a fraud cost, right? And step three is like attach a dollar figure to every safety feature you deprioritize. That number changes every conversation. And four, define your false positive budget explicitly. That's your dial position, and it should be a decision, not a default. And the final one, the math in phase zero is done, and the 300 K versus 500 million annual exposure. Make the prioritization call. I'll leave you with one question for the discussion. If you were the PM at Zelly today with full executive support, what would you fix first? Thank you.